The barge lurched hard against the ice shelf, and Jedediah Keller had exactly 3 seconds to decide whether to cut the tow rope or lose the whole stern post to the current. He cut it. The axe came down clean, the rope snapped back like a whip crack, and the barge swung free of the shelf with a grinding shriek of wood against frozen water. Jedediah drove the pole hard into the river bottom and held, muscles burning, thighs braced against the gunwale, and the barge slowed, shuddered, and caught the sluggish center current of the Grayville River. He let out a breath that fogged immediately in the darkness and straightened up, rolling his shoulder where the impact had jarred through the pole and up into his bones. That was the 3rd shelf this crossing. The Grayville was locking up early this year, and Jedediah was already 2 days behind schedule getting supplies to Havenmore. He was poling back to the stern lantern to check the cargo lashing when he noticed the weight. Not a crate weight, not the shifting of barrels. Something alive, something that had settled itself between the 2 large pitch barrels at the rear of the cargo deck, sitting very still and very deliberately out of the lantern light. Jedediah set the pole down slowly, picked up the short-handled boarding axe from its bracket, and moved aft without making a sound. The lantern swung and caught her. She was sitting with her back against the pitch barrel and her knees up, arms resting on them, watching him with amber eyes that caught the light like a cat's. She was an orc woman, tall even sitting, her skin a deep muted green-gray in the low light, and she was watching him the way a person watches a knife they are not sure yet is being pointed at them. She wore close-fitted traveling leathers the color of storm cloud, a laced vest cut snug across her broad shoulders and full chest, trousers tucked into knee-high boots reinforced at the shin with iron strips, a wide belt with a short sword on her left hip, and a bone-handled knife on her right. Her dark hair was pulled back in a hard knot, and her lower tusks, modest compared to some of the clan warriors Jedediah had ferried over the years, curved up just past her lip. She was, despite every hard and wary thing about her bearing, genuinely striking in the way a mountain is striking. Not beautiful the way a painting is beautiful, but beautiful the way a thing is beautiful when it is entirely, completely itself. "You going to use that?" she said, and her voice was low and unhurried, nodding at the boarding axe. "Or are you going to put it down and talk to me like a person?" Jedediah looked at the axe. He put it down on the barrel lid. "How long have you been on my barge?" He said, "Since Coldwatch. Climbed aboard when you were arguing with that harbor master about your tariff." "That was 3 hours ago." He squinted at her. "I do not carry passengers without a contract." "I know." She reached into a pouch at her belt and produced a coin, a full silver crown, which was roughly what Jedediah charged for a full cargo crossing. She set it on the barrel head between them. "I also know that you are the only barge running to Havenmore before the river locks, and that the harbor master at Coldwatch has decided anyone with green skin in his harbor is a spy for the eastern clans and is to be detained until spring thaw." Jedediah looked at the coin. He looked at her. "What is your name?" he said. "Urzoth Rageborn." She said it plainly, without the performance some warrior-caste orcs put behind their names. Just a name. Just the truth of it. "You are a long way from clan territory, Urzoth Rageborn," he said. "I was a messenger. The message got delivered. Now I need to get to Havenmore before Corvin Holt and his purge riders figure out I crossed the river." The name Corvin Holt moved through Jedediah's chest like cold water. He had heard the name. Everyone this side of the Grayville had heard it now. Corvin Holt was a former militiaman who had, over the past season, gathered around himself a company of hard-eyed men under the banner of what he called the Northern Cleansing. The official position of the Havenmore governance was carefully neutral. The unofficial position of everyone who had watched Holt's riders drag people out of taverns and market stalls for the crime of having the wrong blood was considerably less neutral and considerably more afraid. Orcs, half-bloods, certain hedge-witches, river traders of mixed heritage, they were all on Holt's list, and his list was growing. "You've been followed," Jedediah said. "Not yet." He picked up the silver crown, turned it over once, and put it in his coat pocket. "Stay out of sight of the banks," he said. "We crossed the last open water in about 4 hours, After that, I have to pull through pack ice for 6, and we will reach the Havenmore dock around dawn. He picked the boarding axe back up and rehung it on its bracket. There is a blanket in the forward hold chest and dried meat in the tin on the port gunwale. Help yourself. She watched him go back to the stern pole. He felt her watching him for a long time before he heard her move. The crossing took 8 hours instead of 6. The pack ice was worse than he had expected, and twice he had to get into the water to the knee to push the bow free of a jam, which was a misery he had long since ceased complaining about since no one was ever there to hear it. The second time he was waist-deep in the black freezing current, braced against the bow with both hands. He heard a movement behind him, and then 2 massive hands appeared beside his on the hull, and the barge moved. He did not say anything. Urzoth waded back aboard without a word. Her boots were going to be ruined, but she did not seem to consider this worth mentioning. They reached the Havenmore dock at dawn, gray winter light coming up over the timber rooftops, and Jedediah pulled them in with a quiet efficiency that came from 12 years on this river. The dock was mostly empty. He tied off, threw his cargo manifest over to the dock boy who materialized from a warm corner of the warehouse, and then turned back to find Urzoth standing at the stern looking at the town. Havenmore was a northern outpost in every sense. A grid of timber buildings around a central market square, a garrison that was permanently understaffed, 3 taverns, a trading house, and a great wall of pine forest pressing up against its southern edge. The long winter nights up here lasted 20 hours at their peak, and the cold was the kind that did not negotiate. People were hardy here, or they were not here long. "Is there somewhere you can go?" Jedediah said, keeping his voice down on reflex. "I have a contact, a herbalist on the north end, if she has not been swept up." "Marin Wick," Urzoth looked at him. "You know her. She is my neighbor, lives 2 buildings from my dock house." He straightened up, pulled his coat tighter. "Come on then, I will walk you. Better than you walking these streets alone at dawn." She studied him for a moment, not suspicion exactly. More like she was cataloging something about him, reading a thing in his face that she needed to be sure of. "You are going to walk an orc woman through a northern human town at dawn," she said, "when Holt's riders have been here a week." "I have been walking this dock since I was 16 years old," Jedediah said. "I know every face in this town, and I am not in the habit of leaving a passenger stranded after they helped push my boat off an ice jam." Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, more like a door opening a crack to let in light. They walked. Marin Wick's door was unlocked, which turned out to mean Marin Wick was awake and watching from her window, and she opened the door before Jedediah could knock. She was a small, sharp-faced human woman of perhaps 50, her gray hair in a braid over one shoulder, and she looked at Urzoth with something between relief and a held breath. "I was told you might come this way," Marin said. "Come in, quickly." Jedediah stepped back from the door and Urzoth paused on the threshold and turned to look at him. "Thank you, Jedediah Keller," she said, and the way she said his name like she had been holding it in her mouth to see how it settled stayed with him all the way back to his dock house. He told himself it was the cold that followed him inside. The next 3 days were the kind Jedediah called paperwork days, which was his private name for the days when the barge was in dock for maintenance and cargo assessment, and he spent most of his time arguing with the trading house factor about tariff calculations. He repaired the tow rope bracket, replaced 2 planks in the port hull, and tallied his winter stores against what he expected to be a 4-month lockup before the Grayville opened again in spring. It was not exciting work. It was necessary work, the kind that kept the barge alive and him in business, and he did it with the methodical patience of a man who had long since made peace with the fact that most of his life was built from necessary things rather than exciting ones. He was 31 years old, and he had been running the Grayville for 12 of those years, first as apprentice to his uncle, and then as sole owner after his uncle had retired south to a warmer climate and a quieter life. He was not a large man by the standards of this country, lean rather than broad, with the particular kind of wiry toughness that river work built, and his face had been weathered by wind and cold into something that stopped short of handsome, but got close enough to pass on a good day. He was, by most measures, a decent and unremarkable man, and he had been fine with that for a long time. He was fine with it now. He was very nearly entirely fine with it. He ran into Urzoth on the third day at the market. She was at the spice merchant's stall, examining a bundle of dried northbark with the focused attention of someone who knew what good northbark smelled like and was prepared to say so loudly if this was not it. She had her back half to him and did not see him coming, and for a moment he watched her unguarded the set of her shoulders, the way she held the bundle up to the thin winter light, the small frown of concentration on her face. Her traveling leathers were still damp at the hem from the river crossing. Then the merchant, a narrow-faced man named Oscar who had opinions about most things, leaned forward over his stall and said, loudly enough that the three nearest stalls heard it, "I do not sell to orc kind. You can move on." Urzoth set the northbark down with precise care as though she were putting something sharp back in its sheath. She straightened up. She did not raise her voice. "I have coin," she said. "I do not care what you have. Move on." Jedediah was at the stall in 4 steps. He reached past Urzoth, picked up the northbark she had been examining, and put 2 copper coins on the counter without looking at Oscar. "Those 2 coppers are the fair price for this bundle," he said pleasantly. "I know because I have been buying northbark from you for 11 years, Oscar, and you have never once charged me differently." Oscar's mouth worked. "That is not the point, Keller. She is a person buying spices," Jedediah said, still pleasantly. He put 1 more copper on the counter. "That one is for the inconvenience of doing your job. Have a good morning." He handed the northbark to Urzoth and walked away from the stall, and after a half-beat of stillness, she walked beside him. They walked in silence for a moment. The market square was busy with the particular compressed energy of a northern winter market, people moving fast to stay warm, breath fogging, the creak of cartwheels on frozen ground. "You did not have to do that," Urzoth said. "He was being an idiot," Jedediah said. "I find idiocy efficient to address directly. He will remember it. He will remember that I pay fair prices and expect fair treatment." He glanced at her. "He has forgotten more provocations than that before spring." She looked at him sideways, that same cataloging look from the barge, and said nothing. After a moment she held out her hand. He looked at it. "The northbark," she said. "It is mine." "You bought it on my behalf." "Right." He put it in her hand, their fingers brushed. "What do you need northbark for?" "Marin is making a compound for the baker's daughter. Her lungs are bad." She tucked the bundle away. "I know the mixture. Marin taught me last time I was through." He absorbed this. "Last time you were through. I have been a messenger for the Grey Council for 4 years. This route is one of 3 I run." She paused. "Was one of 3 until Holt." "How long are you here?" "Until I can find a way around the purge, or until it ends." Something in her face closed slightly. "Whichever comes first. And the Grey Council knows I am stuck, advised me to be patient." Her jaw set. "I am not particularly patient." The corner of his mouth pulled. "I noticed." She caught the expression on his face and something shifted in hers, not quite a smile, but in the neighborhood of a smile, the way a shadow is in the neighborhood of the thing that casts it. "The northbark was 2 coppers, she said. "I will pay you back." "Consider it the cost of a dockside conversation," he said. "They are in short supply this time of year." She paid him back anyway. Left 2 coppers on his dock house doorstep that evening while he was inside eating. He found them in the morning and smiled at no one in particular for about 3 seconds before stopping. It was 6 days later that the bet began. It started, as a lot of things in Havonmore started, at the Red Stave Tavern. Jedediah went there most evenings not because he was especially social, but because the alternative was his dock house in the dark, and the dock house in the dark got to be its own kind of loud after a while. He drank 1 cup of mulled wine, played the occasional hand of stone card, and went home. It was a routine. He liked routines. Urzoth was there because Marin had told her firmly that she needed to be seen being ordinary, or the garrison would start wondering why she never left the herbalist's house. They ended up at the same table by the simple logic that the red stave was crowded, and it was the only table with 2 free chairs, which were across from each other, and neither of them had any particular reason to stand. Dag Halsner, who ran the timber mill and had an honest face that he used to hide a competitive streak the size of a pine tree, had been playing dares with a table of mill hands at the next table over, and when his eye landed on Urzoth, it went bright. "The orc woman looks like she could handle a dare," Dag said, loudly enough to invite company. Urzoth looked up from her cup. "What kind of dare?" "Hold your hand in the freeze barrel for 60 counts. I have got 4 copper on the mill hand to beat your time." The freeze barrel was a full barrel of river water kept just liquid by occasional stirring, sitting near the tavern's back door for the sole purpose of exactly this kind of idiotic competition. Jedediah had seen 3 fingers go numb and 1 man faint in that barrel over the years. "And if I beat your mill hand," Urzoth said, 8 copper and a round of drinks." Dag grinned. "Make it a silver and a round, and I will do it left-handed," Urzoth said. Dag laughed and said done, and the back third of the tavern migrated toward the barrel, and Urzoth beat the mill hand by 42 counts and collected her silver without any visible sign of discomfort except that she held her left hand near the fire for a while afterward. Jedediah, who had watched the entire thing from the table, said when she came back, "That was unnecessary." "It was a silver," she said. "You nearly lost a hand." "My hands have been colder than that barrel." She flexed her fingers, which were pinking back up near the fire's warmth. "It is a nerve thing. You learn to separate the sensation from the reaction." He looked at her hand. Without thinking particularly hard about it, he reached across the table and took it, wrapping both his hands around her cold fingers and holding them. She went very still, not pulling away, just still. "What are you doing?" she said. "Warming your hand," he said. "The fire is across the room and you are too stubborn to move closer to it." She looked down at their hands. He was aware, in the particular hyperclear way of moments that matter, that she was considerably larger than him. Her hand was longer fingered than his, stronger at the palm, and that she was not pulling away. "I am not stubborn," she said. "You just put your hand in ice water to win a bet and called it a nerve thing. That is practical, not stubborn." She looked up at his face, and the fire was behind him and the light was warm on her gray-green skin, and she had the particular expression of a person confronting something they had not quite prepared for. She left her hand in his for 63 more seconds. He counted without meaning to. The following morning, Jedediah was checking the barge hull below the waterline when he heard Urzoth's voice above him on the dock. "I will take the dare back," she said. He straightened up and looked at her. She was standing on the dock planks in the gray morning, her breath fogging, something resolute in her posture. "What dare?" he said. "The freeze barrel thing, it escalates." She crossed her arms. "I have seen this pattern in taverns. One dare leads to another and the stakes go up and people get hurt. I do not want to be the person who escalates it into something stupid." He studied her. "You came to the dock at dawn to tell me that." "I came to the dock at dawn to help you check the hull if you want it. Marin does not need me until midday." She paused. "And to tell you that." He handed her the caulking mallet. She took it, looked at it, and then lowered herself off the dock with a sureness that suggested she had done this or something like it before, landing on the shore ice with a solidity that barely cracked it. They worked for 2 hours. She was good at it, methodical, attentive to what the wood was telling her, asking questions that showed she understood structures. He found out that she had, at 14, helped a river clan of orcs repair a flatboat after a rapids incident, and that she had a better eye than him for hull stress and seam separation. "You should have been a boat builder," he said, around the middle of the 2nd hour. "I should have been a lot of things," she said, without bitterness, just fact. "I am good at a lot of things." The Grey Council found the most useful one: messaging, running, carrying, getting from here to there when it matters. She drove the mallet into a seam with clean efficiency. I am fast, I know the terrain, and I am difficult to stop. A pause. Normally. Halt. Halt. The mallet came down again. He has 17 riders and they know this river road. I tried twice and got turned back. Third try I go around over the Havenmore Ridge, but in this cold alone that is a 4-day crossing and the passes may already be locked. Jedediah was quiet for a moment. I go up the tributary to Wolfstone in spring, he said. When the thaw comes, early spring, that route takes you east of Holt's territory. She looked at him over her shoulder. That is 3 months away. More like 2.5, he said. The Grayville thaws fast when it goes. I cannot stay 2.5 months. You cannot leave right now either. He said it gently, not rubbing it in, just the fact of it. So you stay, and when the thaw comes, you have a ride east if you want it. She was quiet for a long moment, looking at the hull. Why, she said, not hostile, genuine. He thought about it honestly because she seemed like a person who deserved honest answers. Because you helped me off an ice jam at midnight and did not ask for thanks, he said. Because the world is currently organized to make your life difficult for reasons that have nothing to do with you. And because I have a spare berth on the barge and it is not doing anything, he shrugged. Also, you are clearly better at hull inspection than my usual man, and he has gone to his sister's for the winter. Something in her face did a complicated thing. She turned back to the hull. I will think about it, she said. She was at the dock the next morning, and the morning after that. The dares did not stop. If anything, they got more interesting. It started because the Red Stave crowd had noticed that the two of them were willing to take challenges, and someone, Dag again, inevitably put a standing challenge board up. The rules were loose. Any dare proposed had to be accepted by both parties or declined by both, and the stakes were decided before the attempt. It was ostensibly just tavern entertainment, but it became something else for Jedediah and Urzoth because they discovered, sometime around the end of the first week, that they had the same threshold for backing down, somewhere between nearly impossible and genuinely inadvisable. It was a game between them is what it was. They both knew it. The dare about crossing the frozen South Pond at its weakest point, Urzoth won, because she could read ice the way Jedediah read water, and she found the load-bearing line that made the crossing survivable. The dare about climbing the garrison's south tower exterior to the third-floor window and back, Jedediah won, because 12 years of barge work had given him a grip and a balance that compensated for what Urzoth had in raw strength, and he reached the sill 5 seconds faster. The dare about eating Marin's medicinal pine tar biscuits, which were medicinal for reasons that included the fact that no one with a functioning sense of self-preservation would eat them recreationally. That one ended in a draw because they both managed 3 biscuits and both declined the 4th with identical expressions. After the pine tar biscuit draw, sitting outside the Red Stave in the brutal cold because the fresh air was necessary, Urzoth laughed. It was the first time he had heard her laugh, and it was not what he expected. He had expected something controlled, short, the laugh of a person who did not give them away cheaply. What came out of her was deep and genuine, and surprised her as much as it surprised him, and she pressed the back of her hand against her mouth immediately after as if she could take it back, which made it worse, made it more, rather than less, because the laugh was still in her eyes. "You have pine tar on your lip," she told him, which was absolutely true and also the least important thing happening in that moment. "You have it on your chin," he said. She wiped her chin. He wiped his lip. The cold was absolute and their breath was identical clouds of white in the dark air, and he was watching her and she was watching him, and neither of them was pretending to look somewhere else. "Tell me something true," she said, which was a thing she said sometimes when conversations had gone past the point of small talk. He had noticed it was her way of pushing through to what she actually wanted to know. "I do not hate the winter here," he said. "Most people do, but I do not. I like how quiet the river gets. I like that I can see every star there is." He paused. "Tell me something true," she considered. "I have not stayed in one place more than 3 weeks in 4 years," she said, and I have been here almost 2 and I do not mind it. That surprises me." He held that sentence carefully, the way you hold something that might break if gripped too hard. "Is it the place," he said, "or the company?" She looked at him with those amber eyes, and the moon was out and the cold was the kind that made everything precise and edgeless at once, and she said, "I am going to bed," and stood up and walked back inside. He sat there for another few minutes by himself, smiling at nothing in particular. The wager, the real one, the one that changed everything, happened at the end of week 3. Corvin Holt came to Havenmore, not with all 17 riders, just 6, which was his way of keeping it looking like a patrol rather than an occupation. But everyone in Havenmore knew what a Holt patrol meant, and the particular silence that fell over the market square when they rode in on that gray morning was the silence of a town deciding how much spine it had. Jedediah was at the trading house when he heard the hooves. He came out to the doorstep and watched Holt and his riders cross the square. Holt was a broad man, ex-military, with a calm face and the particular stillness of someone who was used to being the most dangerous person in any given situation. He wore a red sash over his coat that had become the purge rider's mark, and his riders wore them too. He stopped in the center of the square. "People of Havenmore," Holt said, not shouting, just speaking, with the natural projection of a man who had given orders for a living. "It has come to our attention that this town is harboring a known spy of the Eastern Orc clans. A female, green-gray skin, dark hair, dangerous. She has been seen in this market and this tavern. Anyone who has given her shelter or aid is in violation of the Northern Compact's emergency statutes and will be treated accordingly." He let that sit for a moment. "We will be conducting interviews. No one is to leave the town limits until we are satisfied." The square was silent. Jedediah stood on the trading house step and kept his face neutral and did a very fast calculation. Marin's house was on the north end. If Holt's riders went north first, they would find Urzoth before Jedediah could do anything. If they went south first, he had time. They were looking at the market, which was south center. One of the riders was already moving toward the south residential row. Jedediah crossed the square. He did not run. Running attracted attention. He walked at the particular pace of a man who has somewhere to be because it is normal to have somewhere to be, and he went north without looking at the riders, and he did not breathe properly until he turned the corner onto Marin's lane. He knocked 3 times, which was his knock, and Marin opened it in under a second. "I know," Marin said. "We heard the hooves." Urzoth was standing in the center of Marin's front room, and she had the look of someone who had already thought through all the options and was angry about the results. "Back door," Jedediah said, "through the tanner's yard and down to the barge. I have a cargo space under the deck boards. It is not comfortable, but it is hidden." "Holt knows the river is locked," Urzoth said. "If I am on the barge, I am trapped." "He does not know the river the way I do," Jedediah said. "There is a strip of open water on the east channel. Fast current stays liquid all winter. I can get the barge out. In pack ice. I have done harder. With purge riders watching the dock. The dock is unwatched right now because they went south first." He held her gaze. "We have about 20 minutes, less if someone talks fast. What is your choice?" She looked at him for a long moment. The amber of her eyes in the dim room was very clear, and there was something in them that was not quite fear. Urzoth Rageborn did not. He was beginning to understand, do fear in the conventional sense, but was something adjacent to it. The awareness of a situation that had grown teeth. "My knife is in the pack by the back window," she said to Marin. "Keep it safe for me." "I will keep it until you come back for it," Marin said firmly. Urzoth nodded once. She looked at Jedediah. "Let's go." They went out through the tanner's yard, which smelled the way tanner's yards smell, and moved along the back edge of the north residential block to the dock. The dock was still empty, the gray morning light just bright enough to see the barge's familiar shape against the ice shelf. Jedediah got the underboard hatch open, a hidden storage space he had built himself, 3 feet deep and 6 feet long, meant originally for smuggling trading goods past tariff checkpoints, which he was not proud of but which was now serving a considerably more worthwhile purpose. Urzoth looked at the hatch. How long? 4 hours to get through pack ice to the East Channel. 2 more to reach the Thornback confluence. After that you are out of Holt's territory. And you? I come back, he said it simply. My barge, my dock, my business. He has no cause to hold me. He might make cause. I am very good at having nothing interesting about me, Jedediah said. It has been a skill for most of my life. Today it is useful. She looked at the hatch again. Then she looked at him and did the thing she did sometimes where she seemed to be reading something in his face that he himself was not sure was written there. This is not a small thing you are doing, she said quietly. It is a boat ride, he said. Jedediah, he stopped. I know what you are risking, she said. I want you to know that I know. He held her gaze. There was something in his chest that he had been keeping at arm's length for 3 weeks that was now considerably closer than that, and not cooperating with being kept at arm's length at all. Get in the hatch, he said. We can account for it later. She lowered herself in. He closed the boards over her and set the cargo crates on top, and then he started untying lines with the quiet, methodical movements of a man doing entirely ordinary dock work. Dag Halsner was crossing the dock when Jedediah was 3/4 through the untying. Early crossing, Dag said, keeping his voice level. He was watching the south end of the dock. Cargo for the Thornback trading house, Jedediah said. Should have gone yesterday. I got delayed on hull work. Dag looked at the cargo, looked at Jedediah. He was not stupid, Dag Halsner, whatever the competitive streak suggested. Good weather for a crossing, Dag said. Be careful of pack ice on the east side. Always am, Jedediah said. Dag walked on. Jedediah finished untying, pushed off with the pole, and the barge moved out into the gray morning. Getting through the pack ice was the hardest 2 hours of river work Jedediah had ever done, and he had 12 years of competitive candidates. The East Channel was narrower than the main river, its banks pressing in close, and the ice was thick and irregular. Twice he had to pole over ice shelves and drag the bow free by sheer sustained pressure, the kind of effort that burned down to the bones. Once the barge wedged between 2 ice shelves and he spent 20 minutes working it free millimeter by millimeter, the cold absolutely indifferent to his suffering. After the first hour, he tapped twice on the underboard, which was the signal he had told her meant things are fine, stay put. After the second hour, which was the worst of it, he tapped again. The East Channel opened up at the confluence exactly as he had promised, a wide strip of dark, fast water where the Thornback River drove its current hard enough to keep the ice back, and Jedediah let the barge run free for a moment, breathing hard, his arms burning from the pole work. He opened the hatch. Urzoth came up from the dark below with the coiled efficiency of a person who had been waiting with everything contained, and she looked at the open water around them and the white sky and the receding tree line of Havenmore behind them, and she closed her eyes for one long moment and breathed. "All right," he said. "All right," she said. She helped him pole the rest of the way to the Thornback confluence. At the confluence, the river road ran northeast away from Holt's territory into the open country between Havenmore and the Grey Council's eastern network. It was not safe exactly. Nothing was exactly safe right now, but it was clear. He poled them to the eastern bank, the far side of Holt's reach, and set the anchor stake in the shallow water. They sat on the barge deck in the cold gray afternoon and ate the dried meat and hardtack from his emergency stores, which was not a good meal by any definition, and they were both too tired to pretend it was. "You can follow the river road northeast for 3 days, Jedediah said when the food was done. There is a Grey Council way station at the Birch Fork. I know the way station, she said. I have slept there before. She was looking at the eastern bank, at the path away from here. You should take the rest of the supplies, he said. I can restock in Havenmore. There is enough here for 5 days. Jedediah, he looked up. She was looking at him now, not the bank, and the afternoon light was the thin, pale gold of deep winter, and it was very quiet out here, the river and the cold and the two of them. The wager, she said. He frowned. What wager? "The one I made with myself," she said. "When I climbed onto your barge at Cold Watch," she turned the supply pack over in her hands. "I told myself it was a business arrangement, coin for passage. I am good at keeping things as what they are supposed to be." He was very still, and he said, "And then you put your coat over the hatch in the middle of the night because the temperature dropped," she said. "You did not know I could feel the weight of it through the boards, but I did." She set the pack down. "And then you held my hand at the tavern and called it warming. It was warming." "It was not only warming," she said, and her voice was quiet and absolutely level, the voice of a person who has decided to say a true thing regardless of how it lands. "And the whole work, and the market, and today." She looked at him with those amber eyes that were doing their cataloging again, except this time what they were cataloging was him, all of him, and she did not look away. "You have been looking at me in a way that is not a business arrangement for at least 2 weeks. He did not deny it. He was not built for that kind of lie. "You have been looking back," he said. "I know," she breathed out. "That is the thing I was not prepared for." The river moved quietly around the barge. The cold was bone deep and neither of them felt it particularly. "You are leaving today," he said. It was not an accusation, just the fact. "I have to. Holt will be watching the river by morning." She turned the supply pack over again. "I was going to leave without saying any of this. I am better at leaving than I am at—" She stopped. This, he agreed. She looked at him for a long moment. "What would you have me do?" she said, and there was a rawness in it that he understood was not something she gave away easily. A woman who ran alone for 4 years and kept her own counsel, and had learned that people were mostly unreliable and that the safest thing was to need nothing from any of them. "I do not know," he said honestly. "I know that you need to go. I know that Holt is still back there. I know the river will open in spring." He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, the cold in his face, the pack ice a white blur at the channel edge. "I know that I will be at the Havonmore dock when it does, same as I always am." She was quiet for a long time. "That is a very long wait," she said. "I have been doing this river for 12 years, he said. "I am good at waiting." And then, without him expecting it or moving toward it at all, she leaned across the short distance between them and kissed him. It was direct and certain, the way she did most things, and it was warm against the cold of the day, her mouth against his, and his hand came up to her jaw before he had decided to move it. She made a low sound against him that was half satisfaction and half something older and more complicated, and when they parted, she kept her forehead against his for a moment, both of them breathing in the cold air. "I smelled you," she said. It was barely above a whisper. "Before I climbed onto your barge. I was in the dark behind the cargo shed at Cold Watch deciding. The harbor master was everywhere, and then you walked past." She paused. She did not look away. "You smelled like mine before I ever touched you," she said quietly. "I did not know what to do with that." He did not say anything for a moment. The sentence had landed somewhere central in him and was reorganizing things. "What did it smell like?" he said, and his voice came out lower than he intended. "Pine resin and river water and something I do not have a name for," she said. "Clan orcs have a word for it. It does not translate well." She pulled back slightly, enough to look at his face. It means the specific person your body recognizes as belonging to you, before you know their name, before you have decided anything." She said it without apology or embarrassment, just the fact of it. "I have never had it happen before. I thought it was a story our elders told." He reached up and touched her face, his thumb at her cheekbone, and she let him. "And then you cut the tow rope," she said, and the ghost of that not-quite smile was back. "And then you gave me your coat through the hatch. And I was fairly comprehensively finished." "Fairly comprehensively," he said. "Do not make me say it plainer than that. You already said it very plainly. Jedediah, Urzoth." She looked at him, her face under his hand, and she was fierce and tired and soft all at once, and he understood that this was an Urzoth that almost no one had seen. "Go northeast," he said. "Stay on the river road, get to the way station. Send word when you reach the council." He let his hand stay for one more second on her face, then pulled it back. "And come back in spring. And if Holt is still in Havonmore in spring, Then we will handle Holt in spring. She held his gaze. Then she picked up the supply pack, swung it onto her shoulders and stood. She stepped from the barge to the bank with that effortless, solid grace, turned and looked at him once more. "When the river opens," she said. "When the river opens," he said. She walked east into the pale winter trees, and he watched her until the tree line took her, and then he poled the barge back west toward Havonmore and whatever was waiting for him there. What was waiting for him, as it turned out, was Corvin Holt, not personally. Holt had moved on from Havonmore proper, as he always did after a patrol, leaving behind 2 of his riders as what he called community observers, which was a name for watchdogs that assumed the community would not notice the difference. The 2 riders were named Fetch and Grell by the locals, based on temperament, and they had made themselves at home in the Red Stave's back room and were making general nuisances of themselves. Jedediah came back to his dock on the afternoon tide, tied off, and was told all of this by Marin Wick in the first 3 minutes of setting foot on shore. "They came to my house," Marin said. Her voice was steady. Marin was always steady. "I told them I had been treating the baker's daughter and had not seen any orc woman. They believed me or pretended to. They may come back. They have nothing on either of us," Jedediah said. "Did they go to the dock?" "They looked at it." "Dag told them you had run a cargo to Thornback, which is true." "Good. He carried a crate off the barge and set it on the dock. I will be unremarkably present and unremarkably boring for the next several weeks. That is my plan." Marin studied him. She had the particular sharpness of a woman who had seen a great deal and catalogued it accurately. "You got her out." "She got herself out. I just had the boat." "Jedediah Keller," Marin said, "the most self-effacing man on the Grayville River." She crossed her arms. "You like her." "She is a capable woman," he said. "That is not what I said." He looked at Marin and then away and then back, which was answer enough. "Good," Marin said. "She likes you too. She tried hard not to show it, but she left your name in more sentences than she meant to." She turned to go. "Stop looking like a man who has been caught doing something embarrassing. You are allowed." The winter settled in around Havonmore with the full commitment of a northern winter, which is to say it became absolute and seemingly permanent, the kind of cold that made spring seem like something that had happened once in a story and might not happen again. Jedediah kept to his routines. He repaired the barge thoroughly, which took 6 weeks of careful work. He helped Marin with her compound preparation when she needed heavy work done. He checked in at the trading house, played stonecard at the Red Stave, and was reliably unremarkable to Fetch and Grell, who after 2 weeks had decided he was not worth watching. He got a message from Urzoth on the 32nd day after she left. A small piece of birch-bark sealed with gray wax, tucked inside a regular trading post delivery by the Birchfork Way Station courier. It said, "Reached the way station intact. Council has been informed." Holt has been designated a problem by 3 separate city governors, none of whom have done anything about it yet, which is consistent with their history. The Northbark compound worked on the baker's daughter. Tell Marin. Then, after a space, "You are," he read it 3 times and wrote back on birch-bark because that was what was available and sent it on the return courier. He told her about the barge repairs, about Fetch and Grell and their boring watchdog presence, about the fact that the Red Stave had replaced Dag's Dare board with a weekly stonecard tournament which was probably safer for everyone's fingers. He told her the river was holding frozen, and the ice was thick and clean this year. He told her Marin was well and the baker's daughter was better. He almost told her other things. He rewrote the ending 3 times. The final version said, "The East Channel stays open late. I will look for you when the ice moves." He did not hear back for 18 days, which was the way station courier's schedule rather than a statement. The second message was longer. She had been running a route for the council again, not through Havonmore, not in Holt's territory, but east of it along the mountain road. She described the mountain road with the particular vivid precision of someone who saw the world through their feet and remembered it that way. She had stopped at a clan waypoint she knew and been given a meal and a night's shelter, and she had sat by the fire and thought about the river. The last paragraph said, "I have been thinking about what I told you on the barge." I do not say things like that. I am aware that I said it before I had decided to, which is unusual for me. I have been turning it over. I think it remains true, which is what I thought. I think you should know that. He read it under the dockhouse lantern and then folded it and put it in the chest under his bunk with a deliberateness that meant he knew exactly what he was doing. The third message arrived in late winter, when the cold had reached its most absolute and the river was locked solid as stone. This one was short. It said, "Holt has expanded his patrol territory. He has been designated officially as acting in breach of the Northern Compact by the Havonmore city governor, which took them 4 months and is worse than useless without enforcement. He has 12 riders now, not 17. 5 defected when the official breach was declared. He is angrier and less predictable. Be careful. Also, I dream about the Grayville. I thought you should know that too." Jedediah sat with that message for a long time. In the morning, he talked to Dag Halsner. Dag was the closest thing Havonmore had to a civic backbone, being the only man who regularly told Fetch and Grell to move along without making it a production. He was also, as it turned out, not alone in his feelings about the Purge riders. "There are 9 of us," Dag said, when Jedediah had laid out what he was thinking. They were in Dag's mill, the great wheel frozen still above the ice, the room warm with the residual memory of sawdust and work. People who would stand up if it came to it, maybe more. "If it comes to it, might come sooner than we think," Jedediah said. "Holt has 12 riders. The governor has declared him in breach but sent no enforcement. That means he operates like a law unto himself until someone makes him stop. And someone being us. Someone being whoever is here when it happens." Dag was quiet for a moment. "You are doing this because of the orc woman," he said. "Not an accusation, a fact." "I am doing this because what Holt is doing is wrong," Jedediah said, "and because she is coming back in spring and I would like the situation to be different when she does." Dag nodded slowly. "I will talk to the others." Spring came the way spring always came to the north, not gradually but in lurches, as though the cold was arguing with it and losing ground in jumps. The river cracked in the first week of the 3rd month, long fault lines running up the ice sheet with sounds like cannon fire in the night. By the 2nd week, the east channel had opened back up, dark water showing between white shelves. By the 3rd week, the main channel was moving. Jedediah had the barge ready 3 days before the river fully opened. He was at the dock tightening the tow ring when he looked up and saw her coming down the river road from the east. She was a long way out, just a shape against the tree line, and he stood up straight and shaded his eyes against the morning sun on the snow. But he knew the way she moved. He had memorized it without intending to, sometime in those 3 weeks of dares and hull work and tavern fires, and his body recognized her the way a compass recognizes north. She was not alone. There were 2 others with her, a man and a woman, both human by their build, and they were moving fast, which was not a good sign. Jedediah had the barge untied before they were halfway down the river road. They came into the dock at a near run, and Urzoth's face was tight with the particular focus of a person managing an emergency while deciding how to describe it efficiently. "Holt," she said, "6 riders 2 hours behind us. We crossed his patrol line. He knows we are here." "Who are these 2? Jedediah said, looking at the others. "Nessa Vorn, Grey Council," the woman said. She was in her mid-30s, road-worn, steady-eyed. "And this is Prail. He is a half-blood. He was in a Holt camp for 2 months. We got him out 4 days ago." Prail was a young man who looked exactly as described, someone who had been in a Holt camp for 2 months. He was thin and quiet, and his eyes moved constantly to the road behind them. "Get on the barge," Jedediah said. "Jedediah," Urzoth started. "I know the east channel. We have a window." He looked at her, and everything he had been holding for 3 months was right there at the surface, this close to her face in the sharp spring morning. "Get on the barge. We go now, and we have the argument later." She looked at him for half a second, and that half second held so much compressed time. The messages, the cold, the dream she had about the river, and then she got on the barge. Nessa and Prail were aboard, and the barge was moving before Holt's riders appeared at the north end of the river road. 6 of them, just as Urzoth had said, riding hard and pulling up short when they saw the barge already in open water. Holt himself was not among them, which Jedediah clocked. Their leader was a lean rider in a red sash who pulled his horse to the dock's edge and shouted across the water, "Ferryman, you are in breach of the Northern Compact. Return to dock immediately." "I'm a free river operator under the Grayville Charter of Navigation," Jedediah called back, poling steadily. "Your compact has been declared in breach by the Havonmore governor. Your authority on this river is none." The rider's horse was dancing at the dock edge. He drew a crossbow. This was the moment that Jedediah had not fully gamed out, and he suspected this was obvious from his face because Urzoth stepped in front of him. She put herself between Jedediah and the rider with the crossbow, facing the dock, and she was exactly what she was in that moment: tall, solid, green-gray, and fearless in the morning light. And the message she projected without saying a word was that the crossbow bolt would stop in her before it got to the ferryman. "You shoot a Grey Council messenger," Nessa Vorn called out from the bow, "and you commit an act of war against every signatory of the Northern Accords, including 4 city governors and the King's Road Authority. Is that the bet you want to make today?" The rider did not shoot. His horse kept dancing. The barge kept moving. The East Channel took them, and the current was fast with the new melt, and the riders on the dock shrank behind them. When they were around the first bend and out of sight, Urzoth turned from the bow and looked at Jedediah. He was still poling, focused on the channel, but he was shaking slightly, which he was not going to mention. She walked the length of the barge and put her hand on his on the pole. "You are shaking," she said. "Crossbows tend to do that," he said. "You did not flinch," she said. "You kept poling. Flinching would not have helped." She put her other hand on his face, turning it toward her, and he stopped poling because it was not possible to focus on the pole when her hands were on him. "Hello," she said quietly, not performing it for anyone, just him. "Hello," he said. His voice was rough. "I missed the river," she said. "I know." He turned his face slightly against her palm, a movement that was not much and was also everything. "I got your messages." "Good." She was very close. All of them. "The last one especially," he said. She breathed out slow, and then she kissed him the way you kiss someone after months of cold and distance and messages on birch-bark, which is to say comprehensively and without reserve, and he kissed her back the same way, the pole drifting loose in the current for a moment before he grabbed it again because someone had to be practical. And against his mouth she laughed, that real, unguarded laugh from the pine tar biscuits, and it warmed him more than a fire. Nessa and Prail were very interested in the eastern bank. They ran the channel for 3 more hours until they were well clear of Holt's patrol range, and then they pulled in at a wooded bank and made a camp of sorts: fire, food, the exhausted relief of people who have been running and are now, for the moment, not running. Prail slept. Nessa planned. Urzoth sat next to Jedediah at the fire with the comfortable deliberateness of someone choosing her position, and they talked the way people talk who have been writing letters. They had to be careful about covering all the ground that the letters hinted at but did not say. She told him about the mountain road. He told her about the 9 people Dag was organizing. She told him about what Prail had seen inside a Holt camp, which made him quiet and angry in equal measure. He told her about finding her 2 copper coins on his doorstep that first evening and how he had smiled at nothing. "Good," she said without apology. "You left them while I was eating," he said, deliberately. "You were going to try to give them back." "I was not." "You were thinking about it." He acknowledged this with a look. She bumped her shoulder against his. A casual, deliberate contact that said, "I am here," in the most basic physical terms. And he leaned into it. And they were quiet for a bit with the fire between them and the river moving dark and fast beyond the bank. Nessa needs to get Prail to the Grey Council's eastern office, Urzoth said eventually. I can see them to the Thornback way station. After that they can make their own way. Havonmore to Thornback is a day on the river, Jedediah said, if the channel holds. I know, she turned to look at him. And then, he looked back. The fire was warm on the left side of his face, and the cold of the open night was on the right, and he felt the particular clarity of a moment when a choice is being made that has already been made and is just waiting to be said out loud. Then I think we need to deal with Corvin Holt, he said. That is not what I was asking about, she said. I know, he held her gaze. I am getting to it, she waited. There is not a word in any language I know, he said carefully, for what you described on the barge, but I think I had something like it in the other direction, something that did not feel like an ordinary choice. He looked at the fire for a moment. I know you run roots and I know your work does not stop, and I know that you spent 4 years building a life that fits inside a pack and does not need anything from anyone. And I am not asking you to stop being that. He looked back at her. I am asking whether there is room in that life for someone who is going to be at the same dock every spring when the river opens. The fire popped. Nessa was writing something at the far end of the camp. Urzoth looked at him for a long time, and what he had learned about her silence was that it was not avoidance. It was the sound of her being precise, of saying only what was true and holding back what was not ready yet. There is room, she said. There has been room for a while. I just needed you to say it like that. He reached over and took her hand, which was warm now, both of them warm in the firelight, and she held his hand with a firmness that was not possessive but was definite, the way she did most things. The clan word, he said, the one that does not translate. Grucknar, she said. Grucknar, he said, trying it. You said it wrong, she said without heat. How do I say it right, she demonstrated. He tried again. She shook her head, still without heat, and there was that almost smile in the neighborhood of her face again. Grucknar, he tried once more. That was worse, she said. Never say it in front of my clan. You have never suggested I was meeting your clan, he said. She looked at him, and the smile arrived properly this time, warm and private and entirely real. I am suggesting it now, she said. What remained of the Holt problem reached its conclusion, not by the quiet diplomatic route that everyone had hoped for, and no one had believed in. The Havonmore city governor's declaration of breach had done the political work, and the letter from 3 city governors to the King's Road Authority had done more of it. But Holt was not a political man, and he did not respond to political pressure. What he responded to was being cornered, which is what happened 10 days after Jedediah and Urzoth brought Nessa and Prail to the Thornback way station. Holt came to Havonmore himself, with all 12 of his remaining riders, and he came with the intention of making an example. The example he intended to make was the Red Stave Tavern, which he had identified as a known gathering place for sympathizers, and the example he intended to make was the kind that involves fire. What Holt did not know was that Dag Halsner had not been idle, and Dag's 9 people had become 23, and the 23 had been quietly briefed on contingency plans. What Holt also did not know was that 2 days before he rode into Havonmore, Jedediah had sent a specific message to the Grey Council through the Thornback way station, and that message had requested and received confirmation that a King's Road marshal was 3 days out from Havonmore on a different matter entirely, but would be delighted to be redirected. What Holt also, critically, did not know was that Urzoth Rageborn was on his left flank when he rode into the market square. She came out from the gap between the chandler's shop and the grain store like a resolution, and she planted herself 20 feet in front of Holt's lead horse, and the horse stopped because horses are sensible animals, and Urzoth Rageborn at her full height with her short sword in her hand is an extremely compelling argument for stopping. Corvin Holt, she said, and her voice carried the full length of the market square. You have been declared in breach of the Northern Compact by the Havonmore City Governor, the Thornback City Governor, and the King's Road Authority. Your riders are hereby ordered to stand down and dismount. Holt looked at her with the cold recognition of a man who knew exactly who she was. "You are the Eastern spy," he said. "I have a warrant." "You have a piece of paper that was voided 14 days ago," she said. "You can read it if you like. I have a copy." She did. She had made Nessa write it out at the Thornback Way station, and she had carried it rolled in her belt since then. Holt reached for the crossbow on his saddle, and Dag Halsner's 23 people came out of every door and alley around the market square simultaneously, which was the contingency plan in its simplest form. They were armed with what northern townspeople arm themselves with, which is an assortment of farming tools, timber implements, and a few actual weapons, and there were more of them than there were of Holt's riders, and they were standing on ground they knew. For a very long, very still moment, Havenmore held its breath. Jedediah was standing at the edge of the square. He was not a fighter, had never claimed to be, and the short knife at his belt was there because the river had edges and knives were practical. But he was there, visible in the square, in full sight of Holt and his riders, because being absent had never felt like an option he was willing to take. Urzoth looked across the square and found his face. He nodded once. She turned back to Holt. "The King's Road Marshal arrives in Havenmore tomorrow," she said. "He has copies of all 3 declarations. You and your riders can stand down now, or you can wait and have no choice in the matter." She met Holt's eyes without blinking. "I know which of those options I would take." Holt looked at his riders. He looked at the townspeople in every gap and doorway. He looked at Urzoth in the center of the square, short sword in hand, absolutely immovable. He was not a stupid man. He was a cruel one, which was different. He dismounted. His riders followed, one by one, the red sashes making a sullen color in the gray morning. The marshal arrived the next day as promised, and the arrest was administrative and undramatic, which was in every way preferable to the alternative. Holt and 6 of his riders were taken east in chains for the formal hearing. The remaining 6 had already defected by morning, leaving Havenmore quietly and without their sashes. Havenmore exhaled. In the days following, there was a particular kind of collective relief in the town that manifested as shared meals, overly loud conversations at the Red Stave, and a general increase in the ambient warmth of the population toward one another. Dag Halsner organized a square dinner that nobody formally announced, but that everyone seemed to know about, and that went 3 hours past dark with the fire pits blazing in the center of the market. Urzoth sat next to Jedediah at the long table, and he put a bowl of the river stew down in front of her, and she took a piece of his hardtack without asking because it had been 3 hours and the stew had taken a while, and he let her have it without comment, and that was the most domestic and right thing he had felt in years. "Your clan," he said, when the fire was lower and the crowd had thinned and they were on the comfortable side of full and warm. She looked at him. "What about them?" "You said you were suggesting I meet them." "I did say that." She turned her bowl in her hands. "They are 3 days east of the Birch Fork into the highlands, a summer camp mostly. My mother is there and my mother's brother and about 40 others." She paused. "They will want to assess you." "Assess me," he said. "You are a human riverman who their daughter and niece has apparently claimed as her Grucknar," she said. "Yes, they will want to assess you." "What does the assessment involve?" She thought about it. "Eating what you are given without complaining. I can do that. Acknowledging that you are not the strongest person in the room, also manageable. And not flinching when my uncle tells you that a human's lifespan is a brief and fragile thing and he hopes you will not waste whatever of it you have." Jedediah looked at her. "Your uncle sounds delightful. He warms up," she said, "after 3 or 4 seasons." The corner of his mouth pulled. "And your mother?" Something in Urzoth's face did a thing he had not seen before, something that opened rather than closed, a specific tenderness that she wore without guarding it. "My mother will look at you the way I looked at you from behind the pitch barrels," she said. "She will decide in 30 seconds and she will be right." "What will she decide?" "That you are what I said you were." "And what did you say I was?" She looked at him steadily. "I told her in my last message that I had found someone who smelled like mine." He held that for a moment, feeling the weight of it, which was considerable and also warm, and entirely the right weight for how he felt sitting here in the cold northern night with the embers of the fire and the river sound in the distance. "When can we go?" he said. She blinked. She had not, apparently, been entirely sure of his answer. "The river will hold open for another month before the summer low," she said. "If we go now, we have time to travel east, reach the clan, come back before you miss the high-water cargo season." "Then we go now," he said simply. She looked at his face, and there it was again, that cataloging, that reading, and what she found this time was apparently definitive, because she stopped looking and just looked, the way you stop checking a thing once you know what it is. "There is a custom," she said. "When an orc brings a mate to her clan for the first time, she carries them into camp." He stared. "She carries them." "It is a declaration," Urzoth said, and there was now absolutely no hiding the quality of what was in her expression, which was warm and sure and laced with what might have been anticipation. "It says, 'This one is mine. I am carrying them in. No one else has claim here.'" "I weigh more than I look," he said. "You weigh nothing I cannot carry," she said, without a shred of doubt. He believed her completely. They left Havonmore 3 days later. Marin Wick came to the dock to see them off and gave Urzoth back the bone-handled knife that had been kept safe all winter, and tucked a small packet of dried northbark into Jedediah's coat pocket. "For the highland cold," Marin said. "Steep it hot." Urzoth put the knife at her hip where it belonged and embraced Marin briefly, which was a thing Jedediah suspected Urzoth did not do with many people, and which Marin received with a matter-of-fact warmth that suggested she understood its value. Dag Halsner was at the market end of the dock. He had a stone card in his hand. He held it out to Jedediah. "Winning card from last night's tournament," he said, "for luck." "I do not need luck," Jedediah said. Dag looked at Urzoth. "No," he agreed. "You probably do not." The barge moved out into the open spring river, and the town of Havonmore was behind them, its timber rooftops and its cold square and its fire pits and its long winter now receding into the particular past that becomes foundational rather than just past. The kind of winter that changes the shape of a life. 3 days on the river brought them to the Thornback confluence and then past it, east into the wider open country where the river ran through pine forest and then into highland meadow, the snow still patchy in the shadows, the new grass showing green in the thin spring sun. The barge could not go all the way to the clan's camp. The river got too shallow above the highland ford, and Jedediah anchored it at the ford with a good stone stake and an extra rope. From there they walked. The Highland Road was what Urzoth had described in her letters, visible only to people who knew how to look for it, running along the spines of hills and the edges of tree lines in a way that was invisible from below but clear from above. She moved through it like she was born to it, which she was, and he moved through it like a man who had 12 years of river instincts and was applying them to terrain, which worked well enough that she only redirected him twice. They talked as they walked, the way people talk when they are moving through open country and there is no particular pressure on time. About her mother, about the clan's history, about what he could expect from the camp. She told him that Highland orc camps were noisier than he expected, that the food was heavy on smoked game and light on anything that grew in the ground, that her mother would almost certainly try to teach him something the first day because she taught everyone something the first day on the theory that learning was respect. "What will she teach me?" he said. "No way to know. Last human she met, she taught him to read weather by looking at which way the highland birds flew." Urzoth glanced at him. He was very bad at it. "I read weather by looking at the river surface," he said. "Same principle. Tell her that," Urzoth said. "She will like that." On the second day of walking, when the camp was perhaps a day off, they made camp at a sheltered bend in a creek, the fire small and warm, the highland dark around them full of sound wind, owl, the distant something of large animals moving. They ate from his stores and her supplementary hunting, which had added 2 brace of birds to the provisions in a way that was efficient and matter-of-fact, and which he had watched with admiration, and no surprise because he had long since stopped being surprised by what she could do. The fire was lower. The night was cold with the clarity of high places. He was aware that they had been alone, genuinely alone, moving through country that asked nothing of either of them for 2 days, and that the particular awareness of her that had been in him for months was close to the surface, in a way he was not managing with his usual competence, and she had been aware of it too because she had been watching him with that amber gaze with the directness she applied to everything. "What are you thinking about?" she said. "You know what I am thinking about," he said. She held his gaze. "Say it anyway." He looked at her across the small fire, her face in the warm, low light, her eyes. "I have been thinking about you since the ice channel," he said. "Before that, since the first morning at the dock," he paused. "I am 31 years old and I have been living alone on that river for 12 years and I thought I was fine with it and I was wrong." She was quiet. "I do not need rescuing from it," he said. "I chose it, most of it," but he found the words. "You make the world bigger than it was before you were in it. That is the only way I can put it." She stood up from where she had been sitting, moved around the fire and sat down next to him close, and he turned toward her and her face was right there and the fire was warm behind her. "Grucknar," she said, looking at him. "That is what it means, what you just said." She reached up and put her hand at his jaw, that same gesture she had made on the barge, her thumb at his cheek. "You make the world larger. You make a person larger in it." She searched his face. "I did not know when I climbed onto your barge in the dark that the smell I caught was going to be this." Her voice was low and unhurried. "I am glad it was." He put his hand over hers where it was on his face. The fire was low. The night was large around them. The creek moved quietly nearby. And everything that needed saying between them had been said. And everything that came next was not about words. He kissed her slowly this time. Nothing of the urgency of the East Channel in it, just warmth and intention, and the kind of presence that required nothing beyond itself. She made the sound that was half satisfaction, and this time there was nothing uncertain in either of them. No ice jam to get back to, no crossbow to watch for. Just the fire and the Highland night and two people who had found each other against the odds and were not letting go. She pulled him in and he stayed. The camp materialized out of the Highland meadow on the afternoon of the third day, and it was exactly as loud as she had promised. It was a summer camp in the truest sense, a living thing. Tents and fire pits and the smell of smoke and cured hide and wood smoke, children moving between structures, adults gathered in work groups, a whole world of ordered industry. The tents were large and dark-colored, their hides stitched with patterns that told stories Jedediah did not know yet. Dogs moved through camp with the authority of working animals. The sound was enormous voices, work sounds, a hammer somewhere, laughter. People looked up when Urzoth appeared at the camp's edge. There was a moment, Jedediah felt it even if he could not entirely read it, of collective recognition. She had been gone a long time, evidently long enough that coming back with a human man warranted the particular attentive stillness that ran through the camp like a wave. A woman came out from a tent near the center. She was perhaps 60, taller than most humans but shorter than Urzoth, and she had Urzoth's amber eyes and Urzoth's way of moving, the same quality of being entirely certain of where her feet were. She looked at Urzoth first, and the expression she wore was the specific kind of relief that people keep contained because it would cost them too much to release it fully. Then she looked at Jedediah. She looked at him for a long time. He stood still and held her gaze because running or looking away seemed like the wrong choices. She said something to Urzoth in Orcish. Urzoth replied. The woman listened and something in her face shifted and she said something short. "My mother says," Urzoth translated, "that you have river eyes. She says she has only seen that in people who have spent a long time listening to something larger than themselves." "What did you say?" he asked. "I told her that was accurate." Urzoth paused. "She says it is good." Her uncle was indeed large and indeed had opinions about human lifespans, which he expressed in accented but direct human tongue in the first 3 minutes. Jedediah listened without flinching, and then said simply that he intended to use whatever time he had well, which made the uncle's expression move slightly in an approving direction, which was apparently as far as it went on day one. They ate. He ate what was given without complaint, which included something smoked and unidentified that was better than it looked. He was assessed by approximately 30 people in the course of the meal, which felt like 30 individual small examinations, and probably was. He held his own not by performing anything but by being what he was, which was a quiet, attentive, river-weathered man who was clearly, to any observer, entirely in love with Urzoth Rageborn. That last part seemed to carry significant weight. In the late afternoon, when the camp was in the golden low light of Highland evening, Urzoth came to find him where he had been sitting with two of the younger clan members, attempting to explain the mechanics of barge poling and making a very poor job of it without a river to demonstrate on. She stood in front of him. The camp was watching. He understood that it was watching, that whatever happened next was witnessed, and that this was intentional. "You are ready," she said. "I have been ready since the East Channel," he said. She reached down and she picked him up. Not roughly, not dramatically. Just cleanly and completely, one arm under his knees and one behind his back, and she stood straight with him held against her chest, and she was right. He weighed nothing she could not carry. He had one arm around her neck and his face was at her jaw, and she smelled of Highland air and wood smoke, and something that was just her, that particular self that had been what he was oriented toward for months. She walked him through the center of camp. Every person they passed looked. Some called out in Orcish phrases he did not know. Urzoth's mother stood at the edge of her tent and watched them pass, and she was not holding anything back now. The expression she wore was the released version of that earlier relief, deep and warm and certain. Urzoth carried him to the far end of camp and set him down at the edge of the highland meadow, the camp behind them, the wide open country in front, the late sun on the grass and the mountains beyond. He stood and turned and looked at her. "That is the declaration," she said, in case it was unclear. "In front of my clan, my mother, my uncle. This is my chosen mate. This is the man I am claiming as my own." Her voice was steady and warm, and the amber of her eyes was very bright. "No one else has claim here." "I understood," he said. "I just wanted to hear you say it." "I said it," she said. "Say the other part," he said. She looked at him, and the smile arrived fully, that warm and private real one. "You smelled like mine before I ever touched you," she said quietly. Jedediah Keller, riverman, patient man, the man who cut his own tow rope and shared his coat through a hatch board and stood in a market square without flinching. She took his face in both her hands. "You smelled like mine, and you are mine, and I am staying." He put his hands over hers. "You are staying," he said, and it was not a question. "I will still run Roots," she said. "I am not giving that up, but Roots end at the dock now, that dock." She held his gaze. "Yours." "Mine," he agreed. The highland wind moved through the meadow grass around them, cool and clean, and the camp behind them was warm and alive, and the mountains beyond were wide and permanent, and they stood in the middle of all of it together. He leaned up and kissed her, and she held him with the same certainty with which she had carried him, and when they parted she kept her forehead against his, the way she had on the barge, and they breathed together for a moment, the same air, the same altitude, the same direction. Her mother called something from the camp. "She says the food is hot and we are wasting time standing in a meadow," Urzoth said, against his temple. "Your mother sounds practical," he said. "Where do you think I got it from?" She took his hand. "Come on, there is a lot of stew left." He walked back into the camp beside her hand holding his, and the clan made room for them at the fire with the casual inclusiveness of people who had seen the declaration and reached their own conclusions. And Urzoth's mother pressed a bowl into his hands with the particular efficiency of a woman who communicated care through logistics, and her uncle moved over on the log to make space. The fire was large and warm, and the highland night settled around them, and the mountains stood dark and enormous against the stars, and Jedediah Keller sat at the fire with Urzoth Rageborn's shoulder against his, and thought that the river had given him many things over 12 years. But this was the thing it had been keeping in reserve. He did not know exactly what the coming years would hold, the routes she would run and the ones he would ferry, the summers on the water and the winters in the north, the crossings they would make together, and the ones they would wait out, and the messages on birch-bark when they could not avoid the distance. He knew there would be difficulty because the world was a difficult place, and that the gravel would always be there, familiar and changeable and his. And he knew that when the spring came and the ice moved and the east channel opened, she would be there on the dock. She had said so. He had believed her. He believed her still.